Hi everyone, this is Amanda at Spineless Audiobooks, your one-stop shop for all things audiobook recommendations. Now today, I'm going to be sharing with you my top 10 books of 2023. As you may or may not know, I listened to over 1,100 hours of audiobooks this year. That's about 107 books. And honestly, I had to reshoot this video because book number 106 bumped somebody out of this list. So it's live up to the minute, and without further ado, here we go, starting with number 10. Number 10 is Starter Villain by John Scalzi. Now, this book is fantastic. It's got mystery, it's got villainy, it's got cats who type, it's got talking dolphins, but the best part about this book truly is the narration by Wil Wheaton. Wil Wheaton absolutely crushes the narration in this book, and truthfully, it's so good that I'm not really sure whether it's the book I loved or just the performance. But honestly, it's worth a listen for Wil Wheaton alone. It's a really fantastic story, and he just kills it. It's so good. In the 9th spot is A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher, narrated by Mary Robinette Kowal. Now, this book to me was the perfect blend of fast-paced humor and mystery and a little bit of a ghost story, but it just had me laughing. The narrator is totally self-deprecating, and it's really, really well done. It never got boring. I went through it super quickly, and I really enjoyed every second of it. Now, I have also read Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher, and I enjoyed that very much, but this one for me was just a whole different level of fun, and I absolutely ate it up. Highly recommend A House with Good Bones. In the 8th spot is a special one for me because I am an artist by trade, I am an art teacher, and so when I saw this book, I thought, I gotta do it. And I was right. The Creative Act, written and narrated by Rick Rubin. Now, if you've read this book as a hard copy, please check out the audiobook. Rick Rubin is so meditative as a narrator. He's phenomenal. There are chimes. It really just feels so validating. Every single chapter, every single page of this book just says, are you a creative person? Yeah, okay. So here's what you need to hear. And immediately when it started, I started taking notes, and I know this is going to be an annual reread for me. It might be something I go to anytime I'm stuck creatively, because honestly, Rick Rubin just nails everything about being a creative person. Absolutely phenomenal book. Necessary for any creative friend you have in your life, no matter how they're creative. Number 7 is the most recent read to make this list, and it's The Museum of Failures by Thrity Umrigar. It's read by Vikas Adam, and my God, this book just tugged at my heartstrings. It was so beautiful, and Vikas Adam's narration is unbelievable. I actually forgot a lot of the book that I was listening to a male narrator because he was so able to change his voice for each of the characters, and he made each one unique, and he really captured the emotion in the performance. There was one scene in particular where his voice actually just blew my mind to the point that I had to rewind and listen to it a few more times. And it was so amazing to me to think that this was the same man I'd been hearing through the whole book, because he just brought himself to such a vulnerable place. The book is brilliantly written. It's amazing dialogue. The character development is phenomenal, and it's such a heartwarming story, but it's also a very challenging story. There's some really serious issues in it, but it's just worth reading. I really am impressed. This makes me want to read many more of Thrity Umrigar's books, and she's definitely someone who blew my mind and surprised me. I had just picked this up randomly because I heard the title of it and I thought it sounded cool, and boy am I glad that I did, because it was a gem of a book. In the 6th spot is Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. It's narrated by Fraser Douglas, and honestly, this book just felt like story time. I feel like this is a book that I read early in the year that really turned me on to the power of the audiobook and how absolutely game-changing a really good narrator is. It's a great book to read with someone. I think this is something I could really see myself listening to with other people in the room. It's not for young kids, but I think it's really a beautiful story. And it made me remember how as a child I was so excited by Greek mythology, and I feel like this book lit that up for me again. So highly recommend Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Make sure it's the Fraser Douglas edition. Okay, in the fifth spot, we have The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry, narrated by Scott Brick. This was written by Gabrielle Zevin, who you probably know from her book that was a smash hit this year, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Now, The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry is an older book of hers, but honestly, this book blew me away. It was one of my rereads this year, something that I read early in the year and then revisited late in the year, and I'm really glad I did. Her character development is just phenomenal. And dare I say, I actually enjoyed this more than Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which I read but did not make my top 10 list. The heartwarming parts of this book are just unbelievable. There's a scene at the end of this, and without giving anything away, that just made me snot. I absolutely couldn't believe what I was reading. And while the movie version of this is actually excellent and stays really true to the book, it couldn't touch that scene at all. And to me, it was the most pivotal scene of the book. So I think it just goes to show you how the book has so much more depth. But I really love this story. I don't even know how to describe it other than just watching some people go through life. But it's really actually complicated, but Gabrielle Zevin makes it feel simple. Okay, and our fourth spot is a book that truly is not for everyone. It's A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, narrated by Oliver Wyman. Now, this book is thick, it's immense, it's a huge story, it's a huge undertaking. There are tons of triggers in this book. So please educate yourself on the subject matter before you dig into this one. I do highly recommend it. It was devastating. I feel like this is good literature when it makes you think about life and it makes you think about the way that people are. I don't know if I will ever read this book again, honestly, because it was so emotional. However, I feel like I know every one of the characters in real life. I feel like I know people who have had experiences like this or who I suspect have had experiences like this. And this book made me think about how I treat people, and it really moved me beyond words. I will never forget these characters. I will also say I'm not sure how anybody reads this book on paper because I was unable to see because of the amount of crying I was doing at the end of the book. So again, not for everyone, but this book for me was such an accomplishment for the author. And I hated, but I loved every second of it. So I really can't speak highly enough about it. All right, we're on to our top three. So coming in the third spot is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, also narrated by Neil Gaiman. Now, Neil Gaiman is a brilliant narrator. He's a brilliant writer, but this book for me was the perfect blend of childlike fantasy, mystery, suspense. It was fast-paced. I love the characters. I felt like I cared about the characters immediately. And I think also there's something to be said about a book that makes you feel like you're a child being read to, but is really not for children. And I enjoyed every second of it. I think I want to read everything that Neil Gaiman has ever written, and maybe that will happen. But this book was just impeccable. I highly recommend it if you're looking for a quick, really wonderful read. This has got to be at the top of the list because it's just spectacular. Coming in second is a huge surprise for me, The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, narrated by Daniel Henning. I didn't know what to expect. I just kept seeing the cover of this book everywhere, and I thought, well, that looks cute. This book was so sweet and so heartfelt and really just, I saw an interview with T.J. Klune that said that he wanted this book to be a hug, and man, did he nail that. I think Daniel Henning's narration was fantastic. He did lots of very varied character voices. And, when you can tell who a character is before you hear their name identified, that tells you a lot about a really good narrator. It was fun. It was moving. It just made me, it just made me feel really warm and fuzzy. And I know this will be a book I reread in the future. I have since read 2 other books of his, and I've love them equally, but I think this one tops the list for me because it's a real favorite. And I just really suggest that that you try it out because I think it was a spectacular story. He's a really wonderful storyteller and he nails emotions, like just hits you right in the feels. In my top spot is Cloud Cuckoo Land.
Yay!
By Anthony Doerr. This book was narrated by Maren Ireland and Simon Jones, and honestly, the narration doesn't particularly stick out to me in this book like it does in most of the other audiobooks on the top of the list, but I just really loved this story. I know there are a multitude of interpretations of it. It definitely had some difficult moments, and there were some moments where I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? But overall, when I think about all of the books I've read this year, I read this fairly early in the year, and this is a book that I just keep thinking about. It keeps coming up for me. It keeps just crossing my mind. And, when you read over 100 books and someone says to you, well, what do you recommend? It's really hard to come up with something because there's just so many good ones. I mean, I read probably over 40 books this year that I gave 5 stars to, but this book just came up for me immediately every time I was asked that question this year. I think it really made me think, and it was also a fantastic story. So I went on to read Anthony Doerr's other popular book, All the Light We Cannot See, which I also adored, and structurally they are similar books, but this one for me just had the right amount of curiosity and wonder to it. And it's a book I keep thinking about and I can't stop thinking about. So I know it's a book I'll reread eventually, but it takes my top spot for 2023. All right, before I let you go, I'm going to give you some honorable mentions, and I'm not going to go into why, but I'm just going to tell you the book and the author, and hopefully there's something in here that you also enjoyed, but we'll see how this goes. All right, the book that got bumped off of the top 10 list by Museum of Failures just this week was The Rain Heron by Robbie Arnott. Babel, or Babel, depending on how you pronounce it, by R.F. Kuang. Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. Gotta love the characters in that one. If you're not up for A Little Life, by the way, Hello Beautiful is kind of like a mini A Little Life and a little less harsh. The only nonfiction book to make the list, The Wager by David Gran. Definitely worth checking out if you're not, super into nonfiction but want something really interesting. Yellowface by R.F. Kuang also. I'm going to count these as one, but Psalm for the Wild-Built and Prayer for the Crown Child by Becky Chambers. Short, wonderful. Obviously, there'll be more in the series, but I definitely think those are worth picking up. On the opposite end of the spectrum, at a very long length, is The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese. And then finally, we have Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. Did I hit one of your top books for the year? If not, let me know in the comments. Please like and subscribe. And if there's something on here that you thought was terrible that I loved, let me know that too. I don't want to fight you, but I do want to hear what you think.